I had lived in the house for 6 quiet years before the knocking started, long enough to learn the difference between the normal sounds of a place settling into itself and the wrong ones that arrive with intention. And when the first knock came at 1:09 a.m. on a Tuesday, it wasn't loud or urgent or panicked the way knocks usually are. It was polite, measured, 3 taps evenly spaced. Like someone following a rule they didn't quite believe in but respected anyway. I was half asleep on the couch, a book open on my chest, the television murmuring to no one, and my first thought was that it was a neighbor in trouble, because that's the lie you tell yourself when you still think the world is basically reasonable. So I stood up and walked to the front door without turning on the lights, already rehearsing the apology for being slow, already softening my voice into something helpful. I stopped inches from the handle, though, because something about the knock didn't line up with the street outside my window, which had been empty for hours. No headlights, no footsteps, no dogs barking to announce a stranger's arrival. I leaned closer, listening, and that's when I noticed the other thing. The sound hadn't come from outside at all. It had come from the door itself. I stepped back, heart ticking faster, and the knock came again. Identical in rhythm and volume, not on the wood this time, but from within it, as if the door were tapping on me. "Hello?" I asked, immediately regretting it, because asking is a form of opening, even when the door stays closed, and the house swallowed my voice without echo. Silence followed, heavy and expectant, the kind that makes you aware of your own breathing. I told myself it was stress, exhaustion, imagination, and I went back to the couch with a laugh that sounded thin, even to me. I didn't make it 2 pages before the knock returned, this time from the hallway wall to my left. 3 taps again, same spacing, same politeness, only closer. And I froze with the book half raised, my skin prickling with the certainty that whatever this was, it had moved without crossing space. I didn't answer it. I didn't move. I waited. Minutes passed, maybe more. My pulse settled into a careful rhythm, and just as I began to believe the worst was over, the sound came again farther down the hall, approaching the bedroom door in increments that felt less like walking and more like decision-making. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Pause. Each set a little closer. I backed toward the kitchen, every instinct screaming not to run, because running teaches things how fast you are. And when I reached the counter, I braced my hands against it, grounding myself in something solid and familiar. "This isn't funny," I said quietly, because humor has always been my way of testing reality. The house answered me by knocking back from the inside of the cabinet door beneath my palms. I jerked my hands away, breath-catching, and the cabinet fell silent again, obedient. As if satisfied, it had proven a point. I spent the rest of the night awake. Lights on, every door open so nothing could hide its movement. Telling myself that morning would clean this up. That daylight has a way of dissolving nonsense. And when dawn came and nothing knocked, I almost believed it. I showered. I made coffee. I stood at the window watching the street come alive with joggers and delivery trucks and people who had no idea how thin the walls felt from the inside. And I told myself that neighbors knock on doors all the time. That sounds travel, that the brain fills gaps when it's tired. That was when the knock came again, sharp and clear. From the bathroom mirror, I spun around so fast I nearly slipped, staring at my own reflection, heart pounding, and watched as 3 small ripples passed across the glass from the inside. Not cracks, not damage, just pressure, like fingertips tapping from behind the surface. "Stop," I said, my voice firmer than I felt, and the ripples ceased immediately, leaving the mirror smooth and ordinary. I stared at myself for a long time after that, searching my face for signs of a break I hadn't noticed, wondering if grief can echo long enough to learn new tricks. Because my wife had died in this house 3 years earlier, and sometimes memory feels like a tenant that refuses to move out. I wiped the mirror with my sleeve and laughed again, too loudly. Went to work determined to forget the whole thing. It followed me anyway, not physically, not visibly, just close enough to test boundaries. When I sat in traffic, I felt 3 taps against my chest in the rhythm of my heartbeat. When I answered emails, my keyboard clicked back at me half a second after I stopped typing, as if finishing my thoughts for me. I came home that evening exhausted and irritable, the house greeting me with a silence that felt practiced, and for an hour nothing happened. I cooked dinner. I ate standing up. I even started to believe the rational explanations again. Then, at 9:47 p.m., there was a knock at the front door, this one undeniably from outside. I saw the shadow through the frosted glass. Human outline, patient, waiting, and relief flooded me so fast it almost hurt. Of course, a person, a neighbor. Proof. I approached the door carefully, hand hovering near the lock. And the knock came again, matching the rhythm I now knew too well. Before I could answer, before I could even speak, the house answered for me. 3 taps sounded from the inside of the door, perfectly synchronized with the ones outside. Like a call and response I hadn't agreed to participate in. I froze. The shadow outside shifted, confused. The knocking stopped. Then a voice drifted through the door, muffled but clear enough to understand. "Hello?" a man said, cautious. I think your house just knocked back." I didn't open the door. I couldn't, because the knock came again from inside the hallway this time. 3 taps. Polite as ever, and I realized with a cold, settling dread that whatever had learned to knock hadn't learned it from neighbors or wood or pipes. It had learned it from me. From the countless doors I'd knocked on over a lifetime, from stages and bedrooms and hospital rooms, from the muscle memory of asking to be let in, the man outside waited a few seconds longer, then stepped away, his shadow stretching and breaking as he left. And the house went very still, as if listening to see what I would do next. I stood there shaking, palms pressed flat against the door, understood something fundamental and terrifying. This wasn't a haunting that wanted entry. It was a thing that had already gotten inside and was practicing how to ask permission after the fact. That night, I slept in the living room with the lights on and the doors open. And just before I drifted off, exhausted beyond fear, I heard one last knock, not on wood or glass or wall, but from behind my own ribs, gentle and familiar. 3 taps in a rhythm I'd used my whole life to say I'm here. I didn't answer it. I lay still and listened, knowing that whatever came next would depend entirely on whether I taught it how to be invited. I didn't answer the knock inside my chest that night, but I didn't sleep either. Because silence after something has learned your patterns isn't peace, it's reconnaissance. And I lay there on the couch, staring at the ceiling fan's shadow as it traced the same circle again and again, telling myself that repetition only has power if you let it hypnotize you. Morning came reluctantly, gray and thin. And for a few hours, the house behaved like a house, obedient and dull, as if embarrassed by the attention it had drawn to itself. And I used that window to do what I should have done from the start. I wrote rules. Not superstitions, not prayers, but rules. The kind that exists whether you believe in them or not. I wrote them on paper and taped them to the refrigerator where my eye would catch them even when my mind drifted. Do not answer. Do not mirror. Do not ask questions that sound like invitations. Do not fill pauses. I stood back and read them out loud once, softly, because rules spoken without an audience don't become performances. And the house didn't knock while I did it, which felt like a concession. The knocking returned at noon. 3 taps from the inside of the front door, polite as ever, as if it had waited for a reasonable hour. And I didn't move toward it, didn't move away. Just acknowledged the sound with my breathing steady and shallow, the way you acknowledge a stranger across a room without making eye contact. The taps repeated once, then stopped. I smiled despite myself, a tight, humorless smile because it felt good to win a small round. That was when the house changed tactics. Instead of knocking, it started answering things I hadn't said. I thought coffee in the cabinet creaked. I reached for my jacket, and the hallway wall tapped once, approving. I laughed, a short bark, and immediately regretted it because laughter is applause with teeth. And the house responded with a soft, eager series of taps from everywhere at once, testing whether joy counted as consent. I pressed my lips together and waited until it faded, reminding myself that learning curves flatten when there's nothing to learn from. By afternoon, the neighbor from the night before, returned. Standing across the street with his phone out like a shield, eyeing my house with the careful curiosity of someone who wants to be helpful but not involved. I stepped onto the porch and raised a hand, keeping the door firmly closed behind me. "Everything okay?" he called. I nodded, because nodding is safer than explaining. He hesitated, then said, "Your place. It makes noises." I shrugged, forcing a lightness I didn't feel. "Old houses," I said, and the house, traitorously helpful, knocked 3 times from inside the door right on cue. The neighbor flinched. I didn't turn around. "See?" I added, settling. He didn't look convinced, but he didn't push it. And as he walked away, I felt a surge of anger at the house so sharp it surprised me. Because anger is also a response, and I had to swallow it down like a bad line I refused to deliver that night. The knocking escalated into a pattern too familiar to ignore. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Pause. The cadence wasn't random anymore. It was conversational, leaving space where a reply would naturally go. And I realized with a cold clarity that it wasn't trying to force entry, it was trying to normalize exchange. I sat at the kitchen table with my hands folded under a dish towel and counted breaths, letting the pauses stretch until they lost their shape. And the taps grew impatient, closer together, the politeness fraying at the edges. The house tried the mirror again, tapping from the glass with a lighter touch, almost playful. And when that failed, it moved to the walls behind my back, close enough that I could feel the vibrations through my spine. "No," I said quietly, a statement rather than a plea. And the taps stopped so abruptly it felt like the house had stumbled. I thought that might be it. I was wrong. The next day, the knocks came with voices attached. Not my wife's this time, not anything so obvious, but the voices of people I'd knocked for my entire life. The stage manager calling places, the director tapping the doorframe before stepping into my dressing room, the nurse rapping gently before delivering news no one wants to hear. They arrived without words, just the sound of knuckles on wood, followed by the expectation of acknowledgement. And the temptation was brutal, because those sounds are loaded with meaning, with duty, with the learned reflex to respond appropriately. I shut my eyes and let the sounds wash over me without landing, reminding myself that reflexes are not contracts. The house answered back anyway, knocking in perfect imitation of each one, a collage of courtesy that made my skin crawl. It wasn't haunting me. It was studying etiquette by evening. The house had grown bold enough to knock from places that moved with Mitha inside of my coat pocket, the passenger side door of my car while it was locked and empty, the hollow beneath my bed when I lay down to rest. I stopped driving. I slept in shifts. I ate cold food because the kitchen had become a classroom. And still, I refused. I didn't answer. I didn't mirror. I didn't ask it what it wanted. Because asking would have been the easiest performance of all. The breakthrough came. Unexpectedly, with the simplest of sounds. I was standing in the hallway when the knocking began again, close and insistent, and in a moment of exhausted clarity I realized that the house had never actually asked to be let in. It had always knocked after I arrived somewhere, after I had already crossed a threshold. It wasn't practicing how to enter. It was practicing how to follow. That understanding changed the rules. You don't keep a follower out by guarding the door. You keep it out by deciding where you're willing to go. I opened the front door for the first time since the knocking began and stepped outside, closing it firmly behind me. The house knocked immediately. 3 taps from the inside of the door, offended and eager. I stayed on the porch, hands in my pockets, breathing the night air, letting the sounds of the street reclaim their authority. The house knocked again, louder this time, and I smiled, a real one, because for the first time the sound was unmistakably trapped. "You can't come out," I said quietly. Not taunting, just stating a fact, and the knocking faltered, the rhythm breaking as if the hands didn't know what to do without a surface that belonged to them. I slept in my car that night, then at a friend's place, the next, and every time I left the house behind. The knocking followed me only as far as the threshold, fading into a frustrated echo that never quite reached me. When I returned during the day to pack essentials, the house was quiet, sulking.
Oh.
The walls cool and inert, as if it were holding its breath waiting for me to settle back in. I didn't. I took what I needed and left again, refusing to provide the consistency it craved. Days passed, then weeks. The knocks diminished, spacing themselves out, losing confidence. The neighbor stopped watching. The street forgot. When I finally returned for good, I did it on my terms. I brought friends. I kept doors open. I filled the house with conversations that overlapped and went nowhere, with laughter that didn't wait for cues, with silences that belonged to no one. The knocking tried once, a timid set of taps from deep in the walls, and I ignored it so thoroughly that I almost forgot it had happened. That was the moment it lost me. Not when I confronted it, not when I named it. When I stopped being useful, months later, I stood in the hallway and knocked on the wall where it had liked to practice, 3 times, firm and final. Not as a question, but as punctuation, and nothing answered back. The sound died where it started, absorbed by plaster and paint like any other ordinary noise. And I felt a calm that didn't ask for applause. I learned the last rule then. The one that doesn't make for a good story because it lacks drama. Boundaries work best when you stop negotiating them. Whatever had learned to knock from me never left in a blaze of revelation or defeat. It simply starved, bored to death by a man who refused to perform his own presence. And if, sometimes, late at night, I still feel the ghost of 3 taps lining up with my heartbeat, I let it pass without comment because I know the difference now between a knock and a habit. And habits only survive as long as you keep answering them.